we're going to get started now, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today to learn more about Quizzify and taking wellness to the next level. We're going to start here by introducing our host and CEO and co-founder, Al Lewis. Now, many of you know Al, but for those of you who don't, I'm going to make a brief introduction here. Al is arguably one of the foremost authorities on wellness and population health. He's authored a book specifically about wellness outcomes analysis entitled Why Nobody Believes the Numbers. Al also co-authored a book back in 2013 with Tom Emmerich, and Tom managed benefits at Walmart for more than 12 years. And as most of you know, Walmart is very much on the forefront of better benefits for employees. And in that book, they talk about things like centers of excellence and better pharmacy benefit management plans. So Al is going to be leading our discussion today. My role, this is Mark Delicave. I manage sales and account management here at Quizzify. And what I really like to advocate are these next generation benefits that benefit managers and consultants now have to deliver to customers. And I'm in charge of making sure that we create an excellent experience with our next generation product. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our MC, Al Lewis.
Thank you very much, Mark. We're going to just check a quick box so you just know we're a legit company here. A list of the clients of ours you might have heard of is on the bottom. On the top, you'll see the Harvard Medical School, they call it their shield, which is we are allowed to use it on our health-related questions because they review and sometimes propose questions for us, and that gives us a lot of street cred. And speaking of street cred, many of you have probably read Marty McCary's best-selling book, The Price We Pay. Most of the organizations mentioned in that book did not want to be mentioned in that book. We got a nice shout out. That's the good news. The bad news is you got to read all the way to page 226 to see it. Next. Okay, so this is the agenda. We're just going to do a little summarizing. We're going to immerse you in the experience. As Mark mentioned, you're going to actually play the role of the employee and actually play 5 questions. And we, amongst the top 20 scorers, we'll be raffling or taking a drawing of 3 of them. We're going to get $50 and a nice shout out on LinkedIn if you'd like. We're going to talk about how Quizzify plays nicely with wellness, or sometimes pushes wellness out of the sandbox, depending on what you want to do. How our engagement strategy is guaranteed to engage, literally guaranteed to engage employees. And you might say, how's that possible? And we'll show you using our outcomes measurement. So we're already getting some questions, so that's good. Keep those cards and letters coming in. These are the goals of Quizzify: understanding, appreciating, and engaging in the benefit programs. But remember, benefits are only about 10 to 15% of your spend. The rest is on medical. So as important as it is for employees to understand their benefits, they got to understand how they're spending money on healthcare. And that's what we teach through saving by reducing useless or potentially harmful care, and educating employees and changing behavior, and especially COVID education, where we were the first out of the box with, we had about 50 or 60 COVID questions in March and April, and our greatest hits are still available, and we have even more coming out now as more gets learned. For instance, and somebody actually already asked this question, before everybody got on, we were talking about how cigarette smoke is like COVID. And we just put up a blog post on this, and it's a very useful blog post. You can go to Quizzify and blog. What it says is, remember in the old days when people would smoke inside, and you could smell the cigarette smoke. Now, if you were right next to the person, you smelled it a lot. If you were halfway across the room, you smelled it a little. And if you're all the way across the room, you didn't smell it at all. Same way with COVID. Imagine each of those smoke particles is a virus particle from somebody who does not know that they are infectious. So the 6-foot rule is not magic. If you're closer than 6 feet, you're much more likely to smell the smoke, figuratively speaking. If you're farther away, you're less likely. If you're outdoors and you're upwind, you're not smelling it at all. If you're downwind, almost doesn't matter how far downwind you are. And that's the great analogy to smoking. And that's the kind of thing we teach employees. Mark? So Works very easily. There are typically 10 quizzes, 10 questions a quiz, 12 quizzes a year. People gain the health knowledge and they make the healthier decisions, and it's that simple, and that's the game. Imagine one of the questions we have is, what's the elevator pitch? Our little elevator pitch is, imagine Jeopardy meets health education meets Comedy Central. Wiser employees make healthier decisions, and healthier decisions save everybody money. That wasn't even 30 seconds. We cover the universe of categories with 1,600 unique questions. You can do it you can focus on healthcare savings, like reducing wasteful care. You can focus on benefits education, like, what's an EOB, copay versus coinsurance, freestanding ER versus urgent care, which is one of our favorites, because if you're in a state with freestanding ERs, you know how easy it is for people to get snookered into going into freestanding ER when they just need a few stitches and getting a bill for $1,000. Oh, and speaking of which, surprise bills is one of our specialties. Then when you move on to well-being, well, you got your opioids, you got your sleep, got your nutrition, tons of questions on nutrition, sugar, hidden sugar avoidance, that kind of thing, and of course, coronavirus. Okay, now we're going to start with our questions. Remember, we're going to be asking 5 questions. Well, 7 in total. 5 are going to count for points. And if you're in the top 20, you can win the $50 in the drawing. So the first question is, roughly what percent of cavities need to be drilled and filled? A, virtually all of them. B, the large majority. C, half of them. Or D, the funny thing is I can't actually, oh yeah, here it is. Roughly a third. The others can be quickly and painlessly treated for only $30 with a special solution your dentist doesn't want you to know about. So while you're answering that, we will take the first question that came in, which is, so who else does this health literacy? You're the only people we ever hear about. Well, the reason we're the only people we ever hear about is that I only have 3 talents in my own life. One is analyzing wellness outcomes, hence the books that Mark mentioned. The second is writing healthcare trivia questions. And the third is shameless self-promotion. Okay, so you put those 3 together, or at least 2 of the 3, you get Quizzify. In terms of who else does this, United Healthcare's got a product. We urge you to look at it. We urge you to look at our competitor's product because it'll give you a better appreciation of ours. Mark, do we have... Okay, so a lot of people have been paying attention to Quizzify's blog posts. Yes, the correct answer is that there is indeed a special solution called silver diamine fluoride that your dentist does not want you to know about. I know that sounds like a conspiracy theory, and in fact, there is a question in Quizzify that says, how do you know something on the internet is phony? And one of the correct answers is, it says, doctors don't want you to know about this. And that's true all the time, except for this. And once again, we'll just send you to our blog post, but we'll give you a few highlights. This is called silver diamine fluoride. And these are just some of the headlines about it. It stops a cavity. It actually prevents the cavity from being filled. There are articles on it. This is how it works. You can see the little brush there. It's called a micro brush. And the solution, the little blue dotted thing, gets put on the micro brush. It gets brushed on the cavity. The decay actually turns black, which means that the silver diamine fluoride is working. It also means you got a black spot on your tooth. But it's a molar, right? Most of the time, or it's a baby tooth that's going to fall out. And frankly, actually, you can put something on top of it that gets rid of the black. And that's SDF. I had it in my own mouth. My dentist didn't want me to get it. I shamed her into it as part of an existing visit, and she never even billed me for it because she was so embarrassed. Next. Okay, so, I'm sorry, one other thing. You can get this going immediately. It's easier with Quizzify, but you can do it without. First, see if your dental coverage covers it. You don't actually need it because it hardly costs any money. It costs 25, 30, 35 bucks. Some deltas cover it, some don't. Some blues cover it, some don't. Next, call around to dentists in your market and see who offers this. They all have it. They all have it in the back room somewhere, but only some of them are willing to say, yeah, sure, we'll tell your employees about it. And then just tell your employees which dentists are going to offer this versus which ones have to be browbeaten like mine did. Publicize that list. And then we have a special quiz called Cavities in the Time of COVID. And you can give that quiz to your employees. And it says basically, why pay a ton of money and sit there in the chair, as they call it in the dental profession, for 25 minutes when you can be in and out in 5 minutes with no pain and no Novocaine and hardly any cost? Okay, next question. Now we're going to move on to one of our other favorite topics, which is surprise bills. So excluding COVID, where the employer or the insurer pays the whole bill these days, what are the odds of an employee getting a surprise medical bill for a visit to an in-network emergency room, not any old emergency room, in-network? And while you're answering that one, what I tell you about obnoxious questions? Okay, I noticed Ron Getzel endorsed Quizzify on your website. What's up with that? I thought you two hated each other. All right, so yes, it is in fact, Ron is my, my Lex Luthor, my baby with the one eyebrow, my Iago, my Snidely Whiplash, my Moriarty. You get the picture, right? So you might say, why is he endorsing Quizzify? Well, he did it by accident. He did it on tape at our one of our debates. And he's very upset with me for putting it up. And I said, what are you going to do? Sue me for quoting you verbatim? Good luck with that. He did, in fact, say that Quizzify was, quote unquote, a lot of fun and very clever. So if somebody who can't stand you is endorsing your product, that tells you something about the product. Mark, what do we have? Okay, yes, the answer is we got a plurality or slight majority here. It is 40% of bills in an in-network emergency room includes some kind of surprise from some out-of-network provider. And if you can close that up. And the other thing is, so that's 40% of bills. It also means that 57% of commercially insured Americans report receiving one of these bills, not annually, but in the last, I think it was the last 5 years. So the thing is, we talk to a lot of employers and they say, oh, that's not a problem with us. But it is a problem. What happens is that you probably as an employer have a benefits design that either caps ER payments or after somebody's hit their deductible, their copay is pretty low. And then the claim, which is going to be a very large claim, is auto-adjudicated by the health plan. So you don't notice these four-figure bills because you have so many other four-figure bills, just like the parents didn't notice ET among the other stuffed animals, right? So you just go ahead and pay them. You think you don't have a problem, but statistically speaking, I can guarantee you've got a problem with surprise bills. Now, it's even worse in the era of COVID. And by the way, we predicted this back in April, and now you're reading a whole bunch of stuff about it. Because the copay is zero, the specialist or the doctor who's seeing you or the ER where you're at knows that the employee is not going to complain about the bill. So you get these ridiculous bills. And you can see one where it went from $175 for the actual cost of the test to $2,479. And then you might have seen this one in the news the other day. And ER was charging almost $11,000 for a COVID test. Next. Now, Quizzify will show employees exactly how to avoid this kind of thing. It's a point of service solution that's very easy to use. And our website has details. It has testimonials with people's names, as we sometimes, as we say on our testimonials page, real quotes from real people with real names about how they used the Quizzify surprise billing solution to avoid surprise bills for emergency care. There's no legislation needed. There already is a legislation. And the legislation says that you don't have to sign that financial thing that they put in front of you. You have to sign the consent to treatment, but you don't have to sign the consent to pay for the treatment. You can either give them a little card that says, I consent to appropriate treatment and to be responsible for reasonable charges not covered by insurance, up to 2 times the Medicare rate, up to 2 times the Medicare rate. And this one has an arbitration clause that you may or may not need. You can just take some tape and put it on your insurance card the same way I did here. It has it right there. And here's how well it works. It was in the New York Times. You know, it was in what we call the non-fake news section of the New York Times. They interviewed somebody who talked about using it. They interviewed a bunch of experts who said, yeah, this thing works. And they published it. And when was the last time any vendor got great PR in a national newspaper? Next. Okay, so now we're on to question number 3. Now we're moving into some hardcore medical care here. What is the #1 diagnosis leading to a spinal fusion? Failed spinal fusion, degenerative disc, well, you can see it, scoliosis, or herniated disc. And while we are waiting for that, we got more questions. If somebody chooses not to do Quizzify, what is the reason? That's a good question. You should ask this of any vendor, by the way. The reason is, generally speaking, inertia. Nobody says this is a dumb idea. They say, oh, yeah, we'll get to it down the road, or oh, we don't have the budget or something like that. But nobody says it's a stupid idea to teach people how to spend all this money we're giving them, this big budget that they get. Mark, do we have some answers? Okay, so this is the first time that the majority has not won. The answer is, in fact, failed spinal fusion. Mark, you got to, thanks. Failed spinal fusion. And this is why we educate employees so hard about waiting and waiting and waiting as much as you can on before you get a spinal surgery. You can go next. Because they're the most controversial and avoidable major procedure, and they actually, even though there's not a lot of them, the total cost that you spend on them is quite high. There have been articles about, specifically about spinal fusions as the poster child for overtreatment in healthcare. Next. So now number 4, and we're going to hold off a little on number 5 just to make sure that if you think you're getting 2 or 3 or even all 4 of these right, you got to hang on to close to the end here. What are the 2 largest categories of hospital spending? And are they heart attacks and diabetes? You're only voting once, by the way. Birth events and musculoskeletal, transplants and heart attacks, or diabetes and transplants? And let's see what we got here coming in. Oh, yeah, this was a companion question to the other one that was asked. If somebody drops Quizzify, what is the reason? Okay, well, number 1, nobody has ever canceled a contract not for cause in all the time we've been around, but people do non-renew. Now, to be perfectly honest, in the old days, the non-renewals were probably, frankly, because we screwed up the technology in some way. But that hasn't happened in about 3 years at this point. The 2 reasons for, we've had 2 people out of our 40 not renew this year. One was because they wanted to spend all their money on COVID. Their discretionary money on COVID testing, which was legit, and they might come back in the future. And the other was we just didn't get the engagement that we usually get. Now, the thing about engagement is it's your responsibility, your client's responsibility to get people going with Quizzify. It is completely our responsibility to keep them once we have them. In this particular case, they never got anybody really going with Quizzify. We did actually keep the people we had, but we just didn't have enough overall. Okay, Mark, what do we have here? Oh my goodness. Okay, we've got birth event. Oh, this is a very literate crowd that we have here. That is in fact the correct answer. Birth events and musculoskeletal / orthopedic. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that it's actually not even a close question. What you're looking at here is the top 25 total spends of hospitalization. So number of procedures times cost per procedure. And 11 of them are either musculoskeletal or birth. So joint replacement, and by the way, this is in the commercially insured population. So joint replacements are number one, and then you'll see a lot of birth things on this list. And then there's spinal fusions. What did we tell you? Coming in, both checking in at number 3 and also number 16. Now, you remember the old Sherlock Holmes thing, the dog that didn't bark in the nighttime? Everyone obsesses with diabetes, and yet, do you see any diabetes in here? It's not even in the top 10, and most of these don't even have diabetes as a comorbidity. There are a lot of employees with diabetes, but it's probably going to be 5 to 10 years between when someone is diagnosed and when they, probably even more than 10 years, and when they actually start spending a significant amount of money. So when you go around trying to find, Interactive Health was very big with this, and I'm very proud to say we drove them out of business. They went around trying to find everybody who had the possibility of becoming diabetic in 5 or 10 or 15 years and try to medicate them or intervene with them in some other way. Mark? Okay, so this is a question that where you're going to answer actually twice. There's going to be 2 answers, and incredibly, you are now able to do this on these Zoom things, put down 2 answers. Quizzify advocates which 2 principles of employee health? More preventive care, avoiding potentially harmful health care, healthy behavior change through education, or more workplace screening? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm supposed to, let me see if any others come in here. Okay. You hate wellness. That would be me. Can you play nicely with other vendors? Okay, let's be clear on one thing. I don't hate wellness. I myself get screened at my wife's workplace. The difference is I don't get screened every year, and I don't get screened for things that I have no chance of having. They screen largely because it's Boston College. Boston College is insured by Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, where I've consulted off and on for about 20 years. So they know the right way to screen people, which is according to United States Preventive Services Task Force guidelines. So what I don't hate is wellness. What I do hate is greedy vendors who try to do vastly more wellness than really needs to be done. And in fact, we actually have several vendors, wellness vendors, that we work very well with. And we can work with vendors, frankly, we don't even like. You're just not going to get the Harvard Medical Seal on any questions related to those vendors. All right, what do we have for question 5?
Well, I'm just waiting for it to come up here. It looks like it's not giving me, here we go. I should be able to share the results now, okay?
All right, so yes, so everybody on this call, and the bottom line is you wouldn't have gotten this message, this email, if you didn't already know that I wasn't a huge fan of workplace screening. So we got 0 on workplace screening. More preventive care, and let's talk about that because we did get a bunch of people saying that. But yes, avoiding potentially harmful health care and healthy behavior change through education are the key things. Now, Americans incredibly get vastly more preventive care than they need. And you might say, how can that possibly be? We do. Now, probably 1 out of 10 insured people does not get enough preventive care. Probably, I don't know, I'm just guessing here. 4 out of 5 insured people get an appropriate amount of preventive care. But then you've got another 4 out of 5 out of 10 people, 40 or 50% of 10 people, who are simply getting vastly more preventive care than they need. I mean, there are employers who pay you to go to the doctor every year and also pay you to get a workplace screen every year. And that's just vastly too much. In fact, somebody was telling me a while back that they actually, not knowing when the screening was going to take place, they scheduled a primary care visit with their doctor, and it turned out the screening was taking place 2 days earlier. So they had to fast twice during the same week to basically get the same test results. It's not about preventing diseases that might start 5 years from now and that might actually cause cost to take place 10 or 15 years from now. It's exactly the opposite. And by the way, it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can do both. You can, this is what I say, we can play in the same sandbox or we can toss them out of the sandbox, but you can actually have an emphasis on prevention that will save you some money in 5 or 10 or 15 years, but also work on things that will save you money today. So Americans are the most overscreened, overdiagnosed, overtreated, overdosed, and overcharged people in the history of the United States. And one of the questions came in is, you want an elevator speech? There's your elevator speech right there. There have even been books about this. So here is Seeking Sickness, the futility of trying to screen the stuffing out of people and find disease, overdiagnosed, overtreated, overdosed. And this is not us, cherry picking the Amazon catalog. There are not 4 books. Let's screen the stuffing out of people. People don't have enough diagnoses. People aren't getting enough treatment, and we're not getting enough drugs. Those 4 books do not exist. Now here's an example of overdiagnosed, and this is one of our favorites. And we've got quite a number of questions to help employees avoid unnecessary scans. And a large number of scans are unnecessary. If you look at the list on the left, that's MRIs. And MRIs, this is the rest of the developed world, 2/3 of whom have higher life expectancies, better health outcomes than we do, even though we do more scans than any country except for Turkey. And we're only number 2 in MRIs, but there's no list in which you're number 2 where you covet the number 1 spot, where Turkey is the number 1 spot to begin with. Then if you go over to CAT scans, well, in CAT scans, we are, as they say in the recording industry, number 1 with a bullet. We're 20% higher than the next highest. And all you have to do is give employees a little education about CAT scan, the huge amount of radiation that's in them, the fact that they're going to find things that don't exist, and the fact that a lot of them, they're going to inject dye into your veins and your kidneys. You don't have to tell them anything else. You just have to give them the information that allows them to have a conversation with a doctor and say, gosh, do I really need this scan? Or even better yet, not demand scans inappropriately. I was at a meeting once and we were showing this, I was showing this, and somebody said, we have a specific question about why children should not get CAT scans, which turns out to be a really good example. Children should not be getting CAT scans unless they really, really need them. And one of the people in the room at this health plan said, well, my daughter's had 3 CAT scans. And I said, well, what doctor would get your daughter 3 CAT scans? She said, oh, I demanded them, just kind of matter-of-factly like that. No, you don't demand them just because your employer is paying for them. Next slide. Here's an example of overtreatment. We showed the silver diamine fluoride versus cavities. Treating cavities is a very easy, very classic, very common example of overtreatment. Stents are another. This data is a little old, and actually the US has gotten a little bit better in stents than this, but we still do vastly more than we need to. And in fact, it actually turns out that for the most common indication of stents, which is you've got a single artery and your angina is stable, that stents provide no better outcome than not getting stented. It feels better because you feel better right away. But I think it's like 6 months out, you can't tell the difference between people who had stents and people who had a sham surgery where they didn't know whether they were getting a stent or not. Same outcomes. Next. Okay, so this is another Quizzify question, so it doesn't count toward your final score. Quizzify advocates which 2 methods of driving healthy behavior? Real-time Harvard physician-reviewed health information, hint, that's one of the 2. Employees eating more broccoli, wearing seatbelts, and taking more steps, offering very specific education about hidden sugars, or crash dieting contests. And I got to tell you, I'm going to worry if not everybody gets all of these. While you're doing that, so about what percentage of people are health illiterate? Well, that's kind of a loaded question. And they've measured it many different ways. There are only about 12% of people who count as health literate. I would like to think I'm in that 12% given I run a health literacy company, but I learn stuff all the time. So the difference between this and wellness, one of the differences is that in wellness, maybe 5% of people are going to be in a category where they really need the help and they can learn things from what you tell them that they're going to put to work. Whereas in health education, essentially 100% of people can learn things that they can put to work. You've got a lot of, yes. In fact, actually, I think we have, I think some people must have put the eating more broccoli thing as a joke, okay? Because this is the classic thing they say about wellness, about health risk assessments, is that they tell employees to eat more broccoli and wear their seatbelts and take more steps. To which I always say, in the history of wellness, there has not been a single employee who was not wearing their seatbelt, took a health risk assessment, told the health risk assessment they didn't wear a seatbelt. The health risk assessment said, wear your seatbelt. And the employee says, oh, silly me, why didn't I think of that? And for the rest of their life, they wear a seatbelt. Never happened. You gotta take the poll thing down, Mark.
It should be off your screen. Let me try it again.
Okay.
Is it off now?
No. Well, I can see through it. People should write if it's on someone else's screen. Oh, there it is. It's gone.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so it's not just if health risk assessments really did give useful information all the time, that would be great. But in fact, if you actually read yours carefully, you might find exactly the opposite, that they don't give particularly good information a lot of the time. And here's an example, and this is from a very well-known, very popular health risk assessment. If you look in, it says, how can you make healthier choices? And it talks about dairy products and healthier, and it lists low-fat or non-fat yogurt. Well, here's a trivia question that's too easy even to put in this contest, which is, how do you think they make non-fat yogurt taste good? Yes, you've got health risk assessments that are actually telling people to eat more sugar. Next. So you also, the difference between a wellness program and Quizzify is that in a wellness program, you're trying to identify people using rather crude measures like BMI, that kind of thing, to figure out who's at risk. And in fact, as you noticed on that list of 25 diseases, the people who are actually going to have the heart attacks, have the diabetes events, they're not a large number of your people. They're like 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 500 employed people. And there are plenty of people who are going to show up as false positives and say, oh, these people look unhealthy. We have to, fine them or make them do some things. And there are also plenty of people who are false negatives where you can't tell. In fact, the publisher of one of my books, Wiley, said to me, associate publisher, that they thought they were fairly thin. They went to the wellness program. The wellness program said, yeah, you're fine. You could lose 5 pounds, but you're fine. And about a week later, he got what he would have thought was symptoms of a heart attack, except that the wellness program had just told him he was fine. So he waited 5 or 6 more hours before going to the ER than he would have had he not just been told that he was fine. So you've got 2 issues when you try to play doctor in the workplace. One is finding people who you say have issues who don't, and the other is giving people a false sense of security who have issues but don't know about it. So there's also some economics involved here. A traditional wellness program is going to be more than $75 a year, might even be double that. The annual biometric screenings alone are $40 and more. And then, of course, these days when people are working remotely, I mean, how do you even get people to do it, right? Quizzify is, if you have a large number of employees, can be as little as $8 a year. Typically, it's more like $12 a year, but that's peanuts. I mean, honestly, you can look under your sofa cushions, between your sofa cushions and under the front seat of your car, you can find that kind of money, right? On the other hand, for that kind of money, you're getting an awful lot of stuff. Next. So you're getting engagement, which is so compelling that we are literally, every other vendor that goes to a conference pays to go to that conference, pays to exhibit, or pays to speak. Quizzify gets paid to demo to large groups. We actually, usually we get our expenses covered and sometimes an honorarium, sometimes a free booth, because we engage people. That's the marketplace talking there. And we've got right on our website all sorts of examples. We do it remotely now as well. We have these webinars where we just did one at Benefits Pro last week that was very well received. And don't take our word for any of this. You can just go to the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, not quite. We're not quite at the don't take our word for any at this point yet. So this is, the thing about engagement is people always think of engagement as something that involves health benefits once a year. But in fact, if you think about it, only 1 out of every 12 people who's going to have an issue with their health is going to have that issue during open enrollment period, and it's going to be paying attention when you give them the information about open enrollment. Whereas if you give people year-round information, it will be there when they want it. They might not remember the exact item, but they certainly remember that there are some items there that may be helpful to them. And all they have to do, the thing about Quizzify is you don't actually have to remember a right answer. You just have to remember a wrong answer. And then you can look up the right answers on things. Next. So we love these 2 slides. These are from the World Congress presented a couple of years ago from a company, I suppose we can say the name because they presented it. It's called Activision. And they were saying how complicated all their benefits were because they had so many vendors and they didn't have anybody, specifically to try to educate on those vendors. So they had this ridiculous number of vendors. And we actually thought this was the after picture because it was so well displayed about all the vendors, but it turned out this was the before picture of how they tried to simplify the complicated. And if you look at the actual after picture, they said, oh, so then we rearrange it so now employees can understand it much better. Well, I mean, I look at that and I've seen circuit boards with less complexity than that, right? So now we get to the part where you don't have to take our word for any of this. Oh, I'm sorry. You still have to take our word. We got one more slide before you don't take our word. And then I think in a few minutes we're going to get to the number 5 slide. And there are quite a number of people in contention. Remember, you don't have to be actually winning. You just have to be in the top 20. This is from the Massachusetts Cities and Towns survey. It goes out, we don't stick the survey at the end of the quiz because then obviously you're going to just get participants, which is a classic thing to do that vendors do. They survey participants. Obviously participants are going to like the product. That's why they've participated. We surveyed, or I should say we didn't, the Massachusetts Municipal Association surveyed all registrants, everybody who'd ever signed up. And they still got these amazing statistics, even though not everybody was playing every month by a long shot. And I won't read them to you, but I do want to go to the we show you the money part, which is it's one thing to change your attitude. It's another thing to change your behavior, to change the actual way you spent money. And after only 8 months, there were people who didn't get health care, who would have, and there are people who decided not to get, who decided to get things they otherwise would not have gotten. So like more people got shingles vaccine, more people got silver diamond fluoride, fewer people got annual checkups when they were young and healthy, and fewer people were getting, demanding inappropriate CAT scans, that kind of thing. So we're moving under people who aren't getting enough medical care this way and moving people who are getting too much that way and trying to get everybody to the optimal place. Next. All right, here's a part where you don't have to take our word for it. There is a tool which is freely downloadable from the Validation Institute, which is the be-all and end-all of validity. 5-6 years in business, and no one has ever successfully challenged any of their customers' claims. They have this very simple tool that you ask employees like 3 questions on whatever number of benefits you want to survey, 5 or 6. You ask them, how often did you use it? Was it useful? And is this a cool benefit that our employer should offer? Slightly different language. You take the how often did you use it, which is uses, times how useful did they feel the benefit was, and that gives you an engagement score, and that's the left axis. And then you take the cost of the program, and in this case, they were comparing Quizzify and 4 other programs, and you put that on the right axis, and you can tell who's the most cost-effective engagement, what's the most cost-effective engagement that you have. Now, one little sidebar here is the portal actually scored quite well. And the reason it scored well is that our sponsor, which was Banner Aetna in this case in Arizona, loved their portal. It was a great portal, I have to say, one of the best I've ever seen, but the employees weren't using it. So every month we would ask one question about the portal, and that's why the portal got such a good score. So it's not just that we're playing nicely with other vendors, we're actually improving the performance of other vendors. By contrast, and by the way, we go 100% at risk for that. Oh, don't, yeah, right there. By contrast, let's talk about wellness performance in what they call the Net Promoter Score, which is the most popular. Actually, let's do the regular before we do the wellness, Mark.
Oh, okay.
Which is the normal way that people measure satisfaction. It's on a scale of -100 to 100. And what you do is it's like a 1 through 10, and you take the high scores and you subtract the low scores, and that gives you a net score. So this particular organization did this for a whole bunch of industries. Not surprisingly, the lowest scoring industry was the cable TV and internet services industry, where you're waiting for the cable guy to show up. It's kind of a joke, and they got a 2. I think it's a 2, isn't it? Yeah, it's a 2. Yeah. A 3 out of 100. So that was the worst scoring industry, except for one other industry, and this was Willis Towers Watson. So these are not folks who you could argue were biased against wellness. They did net promoter scores all over the world, and they found that that wellness was actually getting a dramatically negative net promoter score in every region, especially Europe and North America, way below the cable TV industry. So people would basically rather sit around all day waiting for the cable person not to show up than they would get a wellness screen. We don't get that at Quizzify. We get just the opposite. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mark to wrap it up. And the only thing I'm going to do is we have a couple more questions coming in. And when we do the one more question, I'll come back in with polling question. I'll come back in with those. So Mark, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, thank you, Al. We're going to talk for a minute here about who buys Quizzify. About 80% of our customers are looking for a better option in wellness. They might have read one of Al's books. They might have tried other things. And they're at the point where they realize what actually will work in wellness. And in general, these benefit managers understand that wellness that's done for employees rather than to them in a poke, prod, and pry method is wellness that works better and employees like it better. Many of our new customers have had their own experience in the healthcare system and trying to navigate through an illness of a loved one or something like that. Many of our employers realize that their health plan is essentially, in many ways, an unlimited budget. But there's not necessarily an effective amount of training on how to spend that money. We also have a group of employers. The EEOC is going to release its final rules in the very near future, and that'll have impact on incentive limits. And Quizzify has a very simple, elegant solution to that. So please reach out to us if you have an employer that wants to learn more about that. And lastly, many of our clients are more budget constrained, and Quizzify can be a great kind of full service wellness option addressing many aspects of it in one particular product. Now our application has vastly improved in terms of how it shows from the employee's perspective. So I'm gonna jump out of the presentation, and I'm gonna go right into the internet. And I'm going to show you what it looks like from an employee's perspective. And this is a mock-up for a dummy company, Acme. And what's great about this is that an employer can customize most of these fields. They can put a message right at the top about the most recent COVID resources, a program message about what Quizzify's trying to accomplish, a contest message. What we also can customize on the side here are benefits that many employees are just not using that they could use. This is the prevent consent for the ER that Al had talked about before. Here's a link to an EAP program in a quick and easy fashion. Here's a doctor text program. And we had a great blog post out about a month ago about how symptoms from tick bites can give you flu-like symptoms and make people think they have COVID when they don't. And on this page is also access to the quizzes and some short facts on the coronavirus. We also have a new function here that gives an employee the ability to actually just put in a keyword and create a quiz. And then Al's going to talk about this, why I type in the keyword that is a relatively new topic that Al's come up with some great questions on. So I just typed in thyroid, and an employee can type in something like heartburn or sleep and get a whole quiz, but take it away, Al.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Yes, this is, I would not call my thyroid questions great. It's very hard to write a great thyroid question, but they're useful, they're helpful. A lot of times people think they have a thyroid problem. They've been told by a doctor they might, and they want to go look up, so they want to learn some stuff about thyroid. So we've got a quiz form, and I'll just do the first question here is this is one we use in January. Here's a reminder in case it slipped your mind. January is National Thyroid Awareness Month, which are true about thyroids. You should get yours examined to check for cancer every time you see the doctor. Actually, the last thing you want to do is is if you have no symptoms and no reason to think you have a thyroid issue, get your thyroid checked. South Korea did that for years because they thought they were getting this epidemic of thyroid cancer. Their death rate from thyroid cancer stayed the same, but the number of thyroids that got removed went way up. So they dropped it. It was a classic natural experiment. Next is roughly 600,000 people get thyroid cancer, but only 200,000 die of it. No, essentially nobody dies of thyroid cancer. If you feel your cancer, if you feel a lump here, it's not like a breast tumor where once you feel the lump, it's pretty hard to deal with. You can get your thyroid removed, and only about 3,000 people a year die of it. The next is it's more of a hazard for women than men. That's absolutely true. And a great campaign to reduce thyroid. Oh, I gave that one, the South Korea one there. So you can do a whole quiz on this if you want. You can enter any other question as well.
Okay, thanks, Al. Now, I'm going to talk for a moment here about monitoring tracking participation. And this is actually live data from one of our active clients that's permitted us to share their data. But what you can see as an employer administrator is who's registered. This percentage number is the percent of users that have played in the last 45 days. Here's the percent that have played in the last year. At Quizzify, something we're very proud of is that we have an excellent quiz completion rate. Across the board with our clients, it's better than 94%. It's really high here at 98%. But once we get people into Quizzify, they'll spend the 10 minutes and they'll do all the robust questions. The power user rate is the number of people that will take that same quiz again. And they'll go in and they'll read the clever answers that Al's come up with, or they might have read something about SDF or something about spinal fusions, and they want to go to the Learn More link and read more about it just to understand the concept in a little bit more detail, something that might be surprising information. And also on this page, they can see monthly signups, monthly active users. This is also where the employer administrator can put in all those program messages for the interface that I showed you before. So now I'm just going to go back to the internet because I'm going to show the most commonly used report. Quizzify is all about the health literacy knowledge and gaining the crucial health literacy knowledge and understanding and appreciating benefits. So it's about quiz completions, and we can monitor that in real time at the individual level and sort that pretty much any way that an employer would like to do. So let's say it's do 8 of the 12 Quizifys in a year, and you're eligible for a drawing of three $300 gift cards. Well, we can produce that report in real time or pretty much any variation of that report. And we do have API capabilities. We have single sign-on capabilities, so we can deliver Quizify. We're on the Alight platform in a whole variety of ways. And again, that's all kind of employer specific, where we really try to go in and listen and then create a health literacy program that's right for that employer. Now, I'm going to just wrap up in terms of a tour of our system with content. And as Al mentioned before, we have 1,600 unique questions, and we have many categories for questions. We have lots on COVID-19 and adapting to work, on lifestyle, on appropriate screenings, on financial literacy, which has a lot to do with today's healthcare with high deductibles and surprise bills and health savings accounts. We have many kind of shell questions that can be tailor-made to the specific employer. We also have lots of benefits questions that have been created on behalf of our employers that have asked for that type of question. Now, what we do with an employer is really try to understand what curriculum makes the most sense. And Al has a standard curriculum, and then we can layer in a quiz on open enrollment, on healthy heart months, on months where sleep is emphasized. And we make sure that our administrators see the actual question set a good 2 weeks before it's to go out to their employees. But what you can do actually is, as an administrator, is when you get that quiz 2 weeks before, you can go in and you can actually edit it and put in your own wording. Now, here's a question about masks in terms of what's the right type of mask to wear. And let's say that an employer was concerned that they might have people coming in with construction masks on, and they wanted to modify it to add something like, if you need a correct mask, then go here and you can get it. So they can go in and just edit the question, and then put in an answer. They might add to the answer. They might say, if you need a new mask, please call. And then they could just put in a number or a website or something like that, and then it's just a matter of hitting submit. And then it goes to Quizify administration for review and to make sure on quality control. What an employer administrator can also do when they're in here is just replace a question. So if they click on replace, they go right into our database, and they can pick another question by category. And this again is after we've done all this work to make sure we have a decent curriculum, but pretty much on the fly, an administrator can go in here and pick from one of our categories, or they can just search by keyword. And if it's, let's say, urgent care versus ER, they can just type that in, they get our questions, and they can just click and select the replacement. So the takeaway from all this is that we really tried to build an app that's user-friendly from the perspective of an employee, and that enables an employer to really manage content. So by the time it gets to employees, it's exactly what they want. And we have a tremendous amount of question content as well. And then they can also monitor who's playing and how often. So that's the 5,000 foot 5-minute view. I'm going to go back to our presentation here, and Al's going to wrap up with the last question.
Okay, so for all the money, or not for all the money, but for the chance of the money, which popular milk is best for reducing diabetes risk? A classic one of our nutrition/diabetes avoidance questions. Low fat or skim, whole, almond, or soy? And while you're answering that, we have a couple more questions that have come in. What are the costs for groups of 400 to 500? It can be as low as $1 or as high as $1.35 a person a month, depending on how long the contract is and whether you want to prepay the year or not. And then will this presentation be available for viewing? Yeah, of course. In fact, you can send it to everybody you know if you like. And actually, one just came in this second. Can a plan be set up for small and individual self-employed people? That's a little bit too complex to answer on this, but if you want to follow up with it, we can. Okay, Mark, what do we have for the final question? All right, the plurality says whole milk. The plurality is correct. Okay, low fat and skim milk, as we sometimes say in milk, whole is the new skim. It turns out that there are several things about low fat milk and skim milk especially, that make you more prone to diabetes, because milk has milk sugar in it, lactose. And if you don't buffer it with fat, the lactose will spike your blood sugar. And if you're already pre-diabetic, or you have diabetes in your family, or you have diabetes, it'll spike your blood sugar. And the other thing is, it turns out that one of the saturated fats, or the predominant saturated fat in milk, is actually protective. I mean, who knew? And this is stuff that people have been learning the last 2 or 3 years. If you go to older things, or you go to newer things that are written by older people trying to defend the indefensible, they will tell you that, in fact, it's still skim, but whole is the way to go. All right, so on that note, I believe this timed out quite well, Mark. All right, so, yep.
Yeah, we're going to make sure everybody gets, tomorrow you'll get an email with a recording of the webinar as well as the slide deck. And of course, there will be contact information in there. Please reach out with any additional questions.
Yes, and essentially to give you an idea of how engaging Quizzify is, this is a sales presentation, and yet more than 90% of the people who logged on stayed on. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye now.